guys? Dimension Master Studios here. How y'all doing? So, in case it isn't obvious by the title and the thumbnail of this video, today marks a very big occasion for Ninjago, with today marking the 10-year anniversary of Season 3. Yeah, that's right, Rebooted came out 10 years ago on this very day. And something interesting that I've noticed when it comes to the Ninjago fanbase is that many fans have grown to dislike Rebooted for one reason or another, with many fans considering Rebooted to be one of, if not the worst seasons in all of Ninjago. However, for me personally, I honestly really like Rebooted. I really liked Season 3 when it first came out, and to this day, 10 years later, I still really like Rebooted. In fact, I honestly feel like when it comes to Rebooted, this is one of the best seasons in all of Ninjago, and so in today's video, I want to talk about Season 3, and I want to explain why I really like it. So, let's get into this whole thing. And so, just like all of my reviews, I'm going to start off by going over the stuff that I liked when it came to the season, and then I'm going to go over the stuff that I didn't like when it came to the season. So, starting off with the stuff that I like when it comes to the season, I want to start off by talking about the ninja, or rather I want to talk about some of the ninja because I'm going to be saving most of the ninja for later on in this video. So for now, I'm only going to talk about Kai and Lloyd. And so, starting off with Kai, when it comes to him, he didn't really get that much in comparison to the rest of the team during the season. However, I feel like Kai wasn't handled poorly during the events of Rebooted. I feel like Kai's characterization overall was pretty good when it came to the season, and I feel like Kai did have some decent moments during Season 3, but by and large, I just don't really have that much to say about Kai when it comes to Rebooted. Moving on from this, let's talk about Lloyd next, and I really like how Lloyd was handled during the season. So, for starters, at the end of Season 2, we saw Lloyd becoming the Golden Ninja, with him gaining golden power, and him essentially becoming a god. And I feel like this could have resulted in a problem for Ninjago, with Lloyd being super strong. It meant that when it came to the ninja, they wouldn't have to deal with any kind of major threat, because again, given how strong Lloyd is, he could have just ended any kind of problem that the ninja were going up against. However, Season 3 does something really interesting with this, because during the first episode of the season, it's revealed that when it comes to the Overlord, he found a way to turn Lloyd's golden power into an energy source for his army, meaning that if Lloyd were to ever use his golden power, it would mean that the Overlord's forces would get stronger. And this is an idea that I really like, because this is a pretty creative workaround for Lloyd's golden power. Because I feel like if Lloyd fully had access to his golden power all throughout the events of Season 3, it could have resulted in him feeling overpowered during the season. However, as a result of this thing that the Overlord does, Lloyd doesn't feel overpowered during the season, which is something that I really like. Not only that, but later on during the season, Lloyd ends up giving up his golden power, so that way the rest of the ninja can get access to their elemental powers again. But something interesting that we see is that when it comes to Lloyd, during the penultimate episode of the season, Lloyd actually questions whether or not this was the right decision. That is, however, until Garmadon is able to convince him that Lloyd did make the right choice in giving up his golden power, because if he didn't, then the Overlord could have been even stronger than he already is. So that's also something that I find to be pretty interesting. Although speaking of Garmadon, I really liked his dynamic with Lloyd during the season. So for the previous two seasons of Ninjago, something that we had been seeing was Lloyd and Garmadon fighting against each other, given the fact that when it came to Lloyd, he was a good guy, meanwhile Garmadon was a bad guy. That, however, changed during the Season 2 finale when Garmadon was purified and he became a good guy again. And during this season and during Season 4, we get a chance to see Lloyd and Garmadon bonding as father and son, which is something that I think is honestly really cool to see. Especially since when it comes to Lloyd, he never really had a dad growing up as a result of Garmadon being banished in the underworld, so him getting a chance to spend some quality time with Garmadon and even learning from him is something that I honestly really like. And something that I feel this season and also Season 4 does really well is show that when it comes to Garmadon's absence in Lloyd's life, this wasn't really the best thing for him, so Lloyd getting a chance to spend some time with his dad is something that's helping him out, which again is something that I really liked. And so overall when it comes to Lloyd, I feel like he was honestly handled really well during the events of Season 3. Moving on from this, let's talk about the returning characters, and I have a lot of positive stuff to say when it comes to most of the returning characters in the season. So for starters, let me just quickly talk about Misako and Dareth, and when it comes to these two, I don't really have that much to say about either one of them, given that neither of them have that large of a role when it comes to the season. That being said though, I do feel like Dareth does get a couple of good moments here and there during the events of the season, but by and large again, I don't really have that much to say about them. So moving on from this, let's now talk about Wu, and I feel like Wu was honestly handled pretty well during the season, mainly because of a really interesting idea that we see early on during the season. So towards the beginning of the season, Sensei Wu ends up getting captured by the Overlord, and as a result of this, Sensei Wu ends up getting turned into a cyborg, and he becomes a bad guy for a few episodes during the season, which is an idea that I honestly really like. Given that when it comes to Sensei Wu, we've constantly seen him as a good guy and him helping out the ninja, so him becoming a bad guy and him fighting against the ninja, I think that's honestly a really interesting idea when it comes to the show. However, in addition to us getting an evil version of Sensei Wu, we also get a chance to see a good version of Garmadon. Like I said earlier, Garmadon was purified at the end of Season 2 and he became a good guy. And during the events of Season 3, we get a chance to see Garmadon as a good guy, and it's also revealed that when it comes to Garmadon, he became a sensei and he's teaching his own students, which is something that I honestly really like. And I like that on a few different occasions during the season, we actually get a chance to see Garmadon teaching the ninja. I think that's honestly something pretty cool. Plus, like I said earlier, when it comes to Garmadon, I really liked the dynamic between him and Lloyd during the season. I feel like it was handled really well with the two of them getting a chance to bond as father and son during the season. It was nice. But that's not all, because in addition to Lloyd and Garmadon bonding as father and son, we also get a chance to see Wu and Garmadon bonding as brothers. I also think that this is pretty cool, given that when it comes to Wu and Garmadon, the two of them have been fighting against each other for a very long time, so seeing the two of them on the same side and seeing the two of them fighting together, I think that's honestly something really great to see. And finally, there's one last thing about Garmadon that I really like when it comes to the season, and it's that during the season, we learn that when it comes to Garmadon, he took an oath of non-violence, and he doesn't believe in fighting against bad guys anymore. Although we do see him helping out the ninja a few different times during the season. However, all of that changes after Lloyd gets captured by the Overlord. And once that happens, Garmadon breaks that vow and he does whatever he can in order to help out Lloyd, and that does include fighting. And this is something that I honestly really like, because it shows that when it comes to Garmadon, he cares a lot about Lloyd and he wants to do whatever he can to help his son. And so if that means breaking this oath that he took, then when it comes to Garmadon, he is fine with that and he just wants to help out Lloyd, which again is something that I honestly really like. And it's honestly just nice to see Garmadon as a good guy, considering the fact that for a very, very long time in the show, Garmadon was a bad guy and he was constantly doing evil things. So seeing Garmadon as a good guy and him being able to make the choices that he wants to make and him not being influenced by evil, it's something that I honestly really like to see. And so overall, when it comes to Garmadon, I really liked him during the events of Season 3. Moving on from this though, let's talk about the bad guys for the season, starting off with Pythor, and I really liked Pythor during the season. So for starters, the season builds up this big mystery revolving around Pythor. We see this during episodes 3 and 4, where we see a mysterious hooded figure helping out the Overlord. However, it's not clear who this person is. That is until the end of episode 4, where it's ultimately revealed to be Pythor, which I think is honestly something pretty cool, and I also feel like when it comes to the idea of Pythor being alive, this makes a lot of sense, given the fact that Sensei Wu survived getting eaten by the Great Devourer during Season 1, and Pythor was also eaten by the Great Devourer, so if Sensei Wu survived, then who's to say that Pythor also didn't survive? And as we see during Season 3, Pythor did survive. However, we also see that when it comes to Pythor, his scales were bleached by the Great Devourer's stomach acids, leaving him with a permanent scar as a result of that. And as a result of this, Pythor is now more determined than ever to take over Ninjago and get revenge on the ninja, to the point that when it comes to Pythor, he has allied himself with the Overlord, the physical embodiment of all evil and darkness, also that way he can take over Ninjago, which I think is an interesting idea. Not only that, but something else that I really like when it comes to Pythor is that with him working alongside the Overlord, we see that Pythor is completely loyal to the Overlord, and we never get this moment where it looks like Pythor is going to betray the Overlord or fight against him so that way he can take over Ninjago. Instead, Pythor is completely loyal to him all throughout the events of the season, also that way the two of them can take over Ninjago, which is another idea that I honestly really like. And it gets to the point that when it comes to Pythor, he's so loyal to the Overlord that he ends up taking the shrinking pill that was meant for the Overlord, which ends up setting up Pythor's storyline for Season 4, which is something that I honestly think is pretty cool. And so overall, when it comes to Pythor, I honestly really liked him during the season. After this, we then have the Overlord, and in my opinion, when it comes to Season 3, this is where the Overlord was at his best. I really liked the Overlord during the season. So for starters, I really like how the Overlord returns during the season. During episode 1 of Rebooted, we learned that Borg Tower was built right on the location where the Overlord was defeated, and this was meant to represent a symbol of hope and a brand new beginning for Ninjago City. However, it's ultimately revealed that as a result of Borg Tower being built right on top of the location where the Overlord was defeated, it caused the Overlord to be transformed into a computer virus with him infecting the systems of Borg Tower. So it creates this really ironic scenario where, again, Borg Tower was meant to represent a brand new beginning and hope for Ninjago City, but it is the location where the Overlord would ultimately return. So again, it creates this really ironic situation for him. Also, the Overlord as a computer virus, I think that's honestly a really creative idea when it comes to the Overlord, and it ties really well into the technological and sci-fi theme of the season, something that I'm going to get back to later on. Another big thing that I really like about the Overlord, though, is that during this season, we get a chance to see the Overlord's obsession with prophecies again. This is something that we saw a bit of during the events of Season 2, with the Overlord really wanting the final battle to happen, also that way he could eventually take over Ninjago, and this is something that we see continue during the events of this season, with the Overlord wanting to fulfill the prophecy of the Golden Master, and the Overlord does whatever he can so that way he can become the Golden Master, and he does stuff like trying to kidnap Lloyd and draining him of his golden power, and he even sends the Ninjroids into space in order to get the golden weapons so that way he can eventually get golden power to become the Golden Master, which is what ultimately happens. And this, I think, is a really cool idea. Because when it comes to the Overlord, remember, he is meant to be the physical embodiment of all of the evil and darkness when it comes to Ninjago. Yet despite that, during the final episode of the season, we actually see the Overlord using golden power, the power of the first Spinjitzu master himself. And so this is something really interesting because we see the Overlord, who again is the embodiment of darkness, using the power of a good guy in order to take over Ninjago. It's something that I think is really interesting, and as a result of that, the ninja have to use the very things that the Overlord used against the first Spinjitzu master against him, which again, I think that's honestly a really interesting idea, and it once again creates this very ironic scenario where again, the ninja are using the things that the Overlord used against the first Spinjitzu master against the Overlord himself, which I think is honestly a cool idea. And so overall, when it comes to the Overlord, I really liked him during the events of Season 3. But now, before I move on to the new characters, there's one last returning character who I want to talk about, or rather a set of returning characters, and that's the Serpentine. So, during Seasons 1 and 2, we saw the Serpentine as bad guys, with them trying to take over Ninjago. However, during Season 3, we see something very interesting with the Serpentine. During this season, it's revealed that the Serpentine are actually trying to change their ways, and they're actually trying to become good people, which I think is honestly something pretty interesting. And we see that when it comes to the Serpentine, they basically abandon the idea of being bad guys, and they're just trying to live normal lives now, with some of them even having settled down. We see that with Scales during the season, because as it turns out, Scales got married and he has a kid now. So that's already something interesting. But that's not it, because when it comes to Season 3, this season also reveals some very interesting lore about the Serpentine. So during Season 3, we learned that the Serpentine were created by the first Spinjitzu Master, and initially they lived in harmony with the humans. That is, until the Serpentine learned about the prophecy of the Golden Master, and now he would eventually show up at some point and he would take over Ninjago. So the Serpentine tried to help the humans by scaring them into going underground with tales of the first Spinjitzu Master in an attempt to try and save the humans from the Golden Master. However, this didn't work out, and that resulted in a lot of conflict between the humans and the Serpentine, and as we learned during the events of Season 4, as a result of Chen manipulating both sides, this ultimately led to the first Serpentine War. And so I feel like when it comes to Season 3 and also Season 4, these seasons do a really great job at turning the Serpentine from generic bad guys who are just evil for the sake of being evil into genuinely sympathetic antagonists when it comes to the show, by revealing that when it comes to the Serpentine, with them getting locked underground, that happened because they were initially trying to help the humans, but as a result of conflict, it ultimately led to the Serpentine getting imprisoned. Meaning that when it comes to the Serpentine, they were essentially victims when it came to them getting locked underground. And they were essentially locked underground because of stuff that was unfair as a result of the conflict with the humans, and also Chen manipulating both sides. Now, granted, the Serpentine didn't have the best methods for trying to help the humans when it came to stuff with the Golden Master, but still, it is interesting to see what we learn about with the Serpentine during this season, with again, the Serpentine wanting to help the humans, but that didn't work out, and it ultimately just led to conflict in the end. Which is something that I do find to be pretty interesting, but something else that I really like is that when it comes to the Serpentine during the final episode, we see that they are able to help out the humans, with the Serpentine being able to evacuate the civilians of Ninjago City underground so they will be protected from the Golden Master, which is something that I honestly think is pretty cool. And so overall, when it comes to the Serpentine, I feel like they were honestly handled really well during the events of the season. So moving on from this, let's now talk about the new characters of the season. So for starters, we have Cryptor and Mindroid, and when it comes to these two, they're both meant to be more comedic antagonists when it comes to the show, and I feel like the two of them both work pretty well as comedic antagonists during the season, because I feel like the two of them are pretty funny during the events of Rebooted. After this, we have Cyrus Borg, and when it comes to Cyrus Borg, I really liked him. One thing that I really like about Cyrus Borg is that when it comes to him being a ninja ally, he doesn't help out the ninja by fighting against bad guys, but instead, Cyrus Borg actually invents things in order to help out the ninja, with him creating things like the Technoblades, the Digiverse, the Shrinking Pill, and even Pixel, and all of this stuff ends up helping out the ninja in one way or another in their fight against the Overlord. And this is something that we would see continue on in later Ninjago seasons, with Cyrus Borg inventing things in order to help out the ninja. And this is something that I really like because it shows us that when it comes to the ninja allies, not all of them help out by fighting against the bad guys, but instead they can do other things in order to help out the ninja, which I think is pretty cool. But now there is one last new character who I want to talk about when it comes to the season, with that character being Pixel, and I really liked Pixel during this season. So when it comes to Pixel, I talk about this more in my video Why Pixel Deserves Better, but when it comes to Pixel, I really liked her during the season. When it comes to Pixel, I think she has a very interesting story when it comes to Season 3, with her learning more about emotions and what it means to be a human. At the beginning of the season, we see that when it comes to Pixel, she starts off as just being Cyrus Borg's robotic assistant and nothing more. However, as a result of her interacting with Zane over the events of Season 3, Pixel learns more about what it means to be a human and what it means to express emotions and feel them, to the point where by the time Season 3 comes to an end, we see that when it comes to Pixel, she is now fully capable of expressing emotions and feeling things. And at the same time, we also see over the events of the season that Pixel ends up falling in love with Zane, and their relationship ends up being a very big part of both Seasons 3 and 4. And when it comes to Pixel, her entire story during the events of Season 3 of her learning more about what it means to be a human, I think that's honestly a really interesting story for Pixel to get. And seeing Pixel learning more about emotions and what it means to express them, I think that's honestly something pretty cool. Again, I talk about this more in my video going over why I feel like Pixel deserves better, so I highly recommend that you go and check that out. But again, when it comes to Pixel, I really liked her during the events of Season 3. Now, when it comes to Pixel, there are a couple of other things that I do want to say about her, but I'm going to save that for later on during the video when I talk about Zane. But again, when it comes to Pixel, I feel like she was handled really well during the season, and I really liked her during Rebooted. So, moving on from this, let's talk about some of the other stuff that I liked when it came to the season, starting off with the production value of the season. And just like always, I feel like the production value of the season was really good. I feel like the animation for Season 3 was really good. I feel like all the voice actors, as usual, did a genuinely fantastic job at voicing their characters when it came to the season. And finally, there is the music, and the soundtrack of Season 3 was really, really good, with the standout track, in my opinion, easily being Built to Protect, the song that plays during Zane's sacrifice at the end of the season. That, in my opinion, is one of, if not the best songs in all of Ninjago. It is so good, and overall, when it comes to the production value of Season 3, I thought it was really good. Moving on from this, another thing about Season 3 that I really like is the technological and sci-fi concept of the season. Now, when it comes to Season 3, a major reason why I really like the season is because of the sci-fi aspect of Season 3, mainly because we had never seen this kind of thing before. In the prior seasons, we had never really seen Ninjago do anything major when it came to science fiction. Yes, Zane and the Falcon were robots, but that was about it. This was the first ever Ninjago season where everything was science fiction based. Like I said earlier, the Overlord was transformed into a computer virus, the ninja fought against robots during the events of the season, the ninja's main weapons during the seasons were the Technoblades, which could hack into technology, and so much more. Again, Season 3 puts a lot of focus on technology, which I think is honestly something pretty cool, especially since, again, like I said, we had never really seen this kind of thing before. And I feel like this right here was a good example of showing early on that when it came to Ninjago, it wasn't afraid to shake up the formula and do things differently compared to what we were used to when it came to the show, which is something that I personally really liked. And so again, when it comes to the technological and sci-fi concept of Season 3, this is something that I honestly really like. And finally, there is one last major thing about Season 3 that I want to talk about when it comes to the positives, and that is Zane. Now, when it comes to Zane, something that I feel I've made pretty clear when it comes to my videos is that, for me personally, Zane is my favorite ninja and character when it comes to Ninjago, and when it comes to Season 3, I really liked how Zane was handled during the season. So, when it comes to Zane, a major part of his character that we saw during the previous seasons of the show was Zane's humanity. Because despite Zane being a robot, he is still very much human in a number of different ways. And during the events of Season 3, we get a chance to see that exact thing, and we get a chance to see just how human Zane really is. We get a chance to see that with Pixel all throughout the season. At the beginning of Season 3, the ninja first meet Pixel, and Zane almost instantly falls in love with Pixel. And as we see over the events of Season 3, Zane ends up having a pretty big effect on Pixel. Because when it comes to Zane, as a result of their interactions, Pixel learns more about what it means to be a human and how to express emotions, with Pixel ultimately falling in love with Zane over the events of the season, which I think is pretty interesting. And a major thing that we see from Zane and Pixel during the season is the idea that despite the two of them being robots, the two of them are more than that, and they do have the ability to be like humans, and this is exactly what we see during the events of the season, with Zane teaching Pixel about what it means to be a human, and Pixel learning more about being a human and expressing emotions all throughout the events of the season, which I think is an interesting idea, but that's not it when it comes to Zane and Pixel. Another interesting thing that we see when it comes to these two happens during episode 3. During this episode, Zane gives Pixel half of his heart, and as a result of this, Zane isn't able to fight as well as he used to, and in fact when it comes to Zane, he's not even capable of using Spinjitzu. However, Zane is able to be a good fighter when he fights alongside Pixel, and the two of them, by working together, have the ability to use Spinjitzu together, which I think is honestly a really interesting idea to see, and I feel like this further strengthens the relationship between Zane and Pixel that we see play out during the events of the season. And so when it comes to Zane, his humanity ends up being a very big part of his character during the events of the season, and this whole thing ends up culminating during the final episode of the season with Zane's sacrifice. So, during the final episode of Rebooted, the Overlord ends up capturing all of the ninja, except for Zane. When it comes to Zane, he is able to escape from the Overlord, and he goes to fight against the Overlord all on his own in an attempt to try and rescue the rest of the ninja. But in the process, while Zane fights against the Overlord, he ultimately ends up dying. But the thing is, Zane knew that this was gonna happen. Right before he went to go and fight against the Overlord, Zane told the rest of the ninja, "Support me, friends, for one final time." Zane knew going into this fight against the Overlord that he would not come back from it, and he knew that he was going to die, but he still did it anyway. He went to fight against the Overlord in order to protect his friends and the people who he cares about. And I feel like this moment right here is the perfect representation of who Zane is as a character. When it comes to Zane, he is willing to do whatever he can in order to protect the people who he cares about. And when it comes to Zane, if that means sacrificing himself in order to save everyone, then when it comes to Zane, that is not a problem. He is willing to do whatever he can in order to save the people who he cares about. Because according to Zane, it's not about numbers, it's about family. And I feel like this moment right here does a really great job of showing us just how human Zane really is. Because again, when it comes to Zane, he knew for a fact that going into this fight against the Overlord, he wasn't going to survive, but he did it anyway in order to save everyone in Ninjago City. Not just because he was programmed to protect those who cannot protect themselves, but he did it in order to save all of the people who he cares about because they are Zane's family, showing just how much they really mean to him. And so when it comes to this moment, like I said, I feel like this does a really great job at demonstrating what Zane's character is all about, and I feel like this moment shows us just how human Zane really is, by showing that when it comes to Zane, he is willing to make the ultimate sacrifice in order to protect the people who he cares about, which I think is honestly something really interesting. And as a Zane fan, to this day, this scene is still my favorite moment in all of Ninjago. I love this scene so much because, like I said, I feel like this does a really great job at representing what Zane's character is all about, and to this day, I still consider this to be the saddest and most emotional moment in all of Ninjago. I think that this moment is honestly really, really good. However, it's ultimately revealed towards the end of the episode that Zane was actually able to survive, and he was able to infect the systems at Borg Tower, thus allowing Zane to take control of them, also that way he could build a brand new body for himself, so that way he could come back, and so he and Pixel could be together, with Zane asking Pixel at the end of the season, "Are we compatible now?" And as a conclusion for Zane during Season 3, I think that this was handled really, really well. And when it comes to Zane, like I said, I really, really liked him during the events of Season 3. And overall, I honestly feel like when it comes to Season 3, this is where Zane was at his best. I really like Zane all throughout the events of Season 3. In my opinion, he was absolutely fantastic when it came to the season. But now that I'm done going over the stuff that I liked when it came to the season, let's talk about the stuff that I didn't like when it came to the season. And overall, I don't really have that many negatives to talk about when it comes to the season, because I feel like there wasn't really anything that bad about the season. Well, okay, there was one bad thing about the season, but it wasn't anything too big or major. I mean, it's not like when it came to season 3, it introduced this thing that felt really forced and didn't make any sense during the events of the season and made no sense for any of the characters involved. And it's not like this thing ended up tainting the image of season 3, so that way whenever people think about the season, this is often one of the first things that they think about, and it gave the season a really bad reputation that still persists to this day. No, it's not like there was anything like that happened at all at any point during the events of season 3. And okay, yeah, let's just talk about it. Let's talk about the love triangle. So, when it comes to season 3, although I do really like the season, I will admit I feel like the love triangle was not handled well during the season. Mainly because I feel like any way you look at it, the love triangle doesn't really make any sense. So, when it comes to the love triangle, it started off during the very first episode of season 3, where during that episode, Nia found a perfect match machine, and as it turns out, her perfect match wasn't actually Jay, but instead it was Cole. And when it comes to Nia, she ends up keeping this a secret from the rest of the team. That is, however, until everyone finds out about this during episode 3. And during that episode, we see the beginning of Jay and Cole constantly fighting against each other, with the two of them constantly fighting over Nia. And this is something that I didn't like, mainly because, in my opinion, this got kind of old and also kind of annoying after a while. But also, another big reason why I didn't like this is because it didn't really make a lot of sense for Jay or Cole to be doing this kind of thing. So, for starters, in the previous seasons of Ninjago, we had seen that when it came to Jay, he had feelings for Nia, and Cole was completely aware of this. And when it came to Jay and Nia, we saw that the two of them kind of had a thing going on during the first few seasons, and again, Cole was completely aware of this. But at the same time, it was never once suggested at any point during the events of the previous seasons that Cole had feelings for Nia. So when it comes to this season, we see that when it comes to Cole, as it turns out, he does actually have feelings for Nia. But again, the previous seasons never once established this at any point. It was never once hinted that Cole had romantic feelings for Nia at any point, and the show made it clear that when it came to Cole, he only saw Nia as a friend, and that was it. So when it comes to Cole having feelings for Nia, this honestly feels like it comes out of nowhere. So when it comes to Cole, it doesn't really make a lot of sense why he's fighting with Jay for Nia's affection, but at the same time, when it comes to Jay, it also doesn't really make the most sense for him to be doing this kind of thing, and given that, like I said, it was never once established that Cole had romantic feelings for Nia at any point, and when it came to Jay, he and Nia already had a thing going on, and it was kind of clear that when it came to Jay and Nia, the two of them liked one another. So why is it that Jay's getting involved in this? It doesn't really make the most amount of sense in my opinion. However, that's not it, because another big problem that I have when it comes to Jay and Cole fighting over Nia is that they treat Nia a lot less like a person during the season. When it comes to Jay and Cole, with the two of them constantly fighting over Nia, they essentially treat her more like a prize to be won, with the two of them constantly fighting over their affections for Nia and them constantly wanting Nia to choose one of them. Which is something that I feel doesn't really make a lot of sense for either of them. Especially Jay, it doesn't really make a lot of sense that he would be doing this kind of thing, given that he has romantic feelings for Nia, so why would he be treating her like this? And it also doesn't make any sense for Cole to be doing this, given that when it comes to Cole, he's a really nice guy who cares a lot about others. So again, why is he doing this? It doesn't really make a lot of sense for Jay and Cole to be acting like this way around Nia, and again, them not treating her like a person, and them treating her more like a prize to be won. They don't treat her like a friend, they treat her like an item, and so again, it doesn't really make the most amount of sense. But then we have Nia, and she also wasn't handled that well as a result of this, because when it comes to Nia, instead of doing something like trying to stop Jay and Cole from fighting against each other, instead, Nia arguably makes things worse when it comes to these two fighting over her, because not only does Nia not do anything to stop Jay and Cole from fighting over her, But Nia actually adds fuel to the fire on a number of different occasions, with Nia doing stuff like taking Jay and Cole on double dates, and Nia never gives them a direct answer when it comes to which one of them she would end up choosing, and also there's just some other stuff that Nia ends up doing during the season that just adds to the fighting, like for example the infamous wire scene where Nia had to cut either a blue or black wire, and when it came to Jay and Cole, the two of them interpreted that as Nia choosing one of them, and when it comes to Nia, she did end up cutting a wire, but we never found out which one she did cut. And so again, this whole thing with Nia, I feel, isn't really handled the best, because again, it feels like she's just adding fuel to the fire and she's just continuing the fighting between these two. Also, there's one other thing about Nia during Season 3 that I want to point out. Earlier I said that when it came to Nia, she never gave Jay or Cole a direct answer when the two of them asked her to choose one of them. And at one point when it comes to Nia, instead of choosing either of them, instead she chooses a robot usher at a movie theater, and Nia ends up calling him Joel, saying how it's a mix between Jay and Cole. Also, one other thing, the robot usher says that Joel isn't his name, and Nia tells him, and I quote, "Just like all boys, you can be reprogrammed." What exactly is that supposed to mean? It doesn't make any sense, and again, why would Nia say that? So yeah, when it comes to this whole thing with the love triangle, I feel like overall it really wasn't handled that well, and I feel like Season 3 is where Jay, Cole, and Nia weren't really at their best when it came to the show. And I really wasn't the biggest fan of any of these characters during Season 3, because again, I feel like the love triangle really wasn't handled well during the events of the season, and all three of their characters weren't really that great during the events of Rebooted. And so that's pretty much all I got for you guys. When it comes to Season 3, like I said at the beginning of the video, I honestly really liked this season. There were a lot of aspects about Season 3 that I honestly really enjoyed a lot. I really liked the technological and sci-fi aspect of the season. I thought it was pretty good. I feel like a lot of the new and returning characters were handled really well during the season. I really liked the stuff with Lloyd and Zane during the season. I feel like the two of them were handled really well. And overall, when it came to Season 3, with the love triangle being the only real exception, I genuinely enjoyed a lot of stuff from the season. And also, like I said towards the beginning of the video, in my opinion, when it comes to Season 3, this is one of the best Ninjago seasons that we've ever gotten. And for me personally, when it comes to Season 3, this season is easily a top 3 season when it comes to Ninjago. And when it comes to Rebooted, it's actually my third favorite Ninjago season of all time, right behind Skybound in the number 2 spot and the Ice Chapter as my overall favorite season of Ninjago. But when it comes to Rebooted, again, I really like this season. And in my opinion, 10 years later, Rebooted is still an absolutely fantastic season. And so that's pretty much all I got for you guys. But before I end the video, there is actually something that I want to quickly talk about, and this is going to be an update when it comes to my channel, so if you guys don't want to watch that, you can click away from the video. That is totally fine. But for those of you who are still here, I want to make some announcements about some upcoming videos that I'm going to release later on during the year. So when it comes to the videos that I want to announce, there's 5 videos in particular that I want to talk about. For starters, in case you guys don't know, this year marks the 5-year anniversary of the release of March of the Oni, which technically means this year marks the 5-year anniversary of the ending of the Oni trilogy. And so something that I'm going to be releasing later on during the year is a 3-part review of the Oni trilogy, where I review seasons 8, 9, and 10. So I really hope that you guys are looking forward to those. But that's not all, because this year also marks the 5-year anniversary of the release of Season 11. Now, I already made a review of Season 11 last year, but I still plan on making a big video for the release of Season 11, and I really hope that you guys are looking forward to that, especially if you're someone like me who really likes Season 11, because I have a lot of stuff that I want to say when it comes to the season, and so again, I really hope that you guys are looking forward to it. But that is not all, because there is one last video that I want to announce, And when it comes to that last video, it is going to be one of, if not the biggest projects that I am ever going to do when it comes to my channel, and that is a potential, now I'm not saying this is going to be the case, but it is a potential multi-hour long breakdown and review of the Ice chapter that I am going to be releasing on the date of the 5-year anniversary of the Ice chapter, which is August 19th. And I really hope that you guys are looking forward to this. This is something that I am really looking forward to making, and this is a video that's going to be unlike any video that I've ever made on my channel before. So again, I really hope that you guys are looking forward to this, and I'm going to tell you guys about updates when it comes to this video as the year goes on, before we get to the ultimate release date of the video on August 19th. And so again, I really hope that you guys are looking forward to this video. Like I said, the Ice chapter is my personal favorite season in all of Ninjago, and so I really hope that you guys are looking forward to this video. I know that for me personally, I am. And so that's pretty much all I got for you guys. So tell me down below what do you guys think. Hey, tell me what were your guys' thoughts when it came to Rebooted. Tell me down below, and I hope you guys enjoy. Later guys, this is Dimension Master Studios, signing off.